You know when you really love a subject and you could talk about it for hours, but then somebody asks you a very basic question that has a very complex answer behind it, and your mind just kind of blanks, and you give like a really surface level answer to it, like it's cool, or it's like, oh well, it's just a thing. That's the problem I've been having with like figuring out how I want to teach art. Like, it's not that hard to teach how to do art. Take, for example, a circle. This is a circle. It is a 2D representation of a sphere. This is a sphere with a little cute heart in it. It can rotate because it has an X, Y, and Z coordinate system, while this one only has an X and a Y coordinate system. There's 2 here, 3 here. This is a circle because it's 2D. This is a sphere because it's 3D. Artists will like interchange these words very often because they're representations of the same idea, but they do technically have a difference. So when you're talking about how to draw this thing, like how do you do it? Well, there's a very simple solution, but first, that goes away real quick. That thing has been floating around and it's been very hard to keep still. Let me tell you, it needs to be thrown away. Now, the question of the day is, how do you draw a circle? And the answer is to use something that has circular momentum. And most humans already actually have this, which you can tell if you have ever swung around your arm, right? Like, your arm is a ball joint. It's used so that you can like move your arm in different locations in space, which means that if you want to draw a circle, you can literally just use the shoulder and rotate it like normal. The thing to practice at that point is just to make it smoother, so like you can make little circles easily, or to connect these points. And that's really it. That's how you draw a circle. Now, for some of you, that's the end of the lesson. That's a ta-da moment where you've learned how a ball can turn into a circle. But for other people, you know, they'll take longer to practice, because some people will like try to use the ball of their shoulder and then like it's not working well, and it's like, well, that's not very much of a circle. And the problem is that like I moved my body instead of just the joint, which, you know, is an easy error to correct if somebody else notices that, or if you notice that. But what if you have another problem, which is that you need to rotate this somewhere else? Because you're not going to be swinging your arm everywhere, every time you want to draw a circle, right? You want to use it on a tablet or a notepad or on like a canvas and stuff. And the way that you're positioning the arm can really influence how that circle is made. And so how do you correct for that? Now, people still make circles without using the ball of their joints, usually with their wrist. And that's not the best idea, because like your wrist isn't a circle. It has 2 bones which are like crisscrossing, so your arm can do this. But like if you try to rotate your hand, it stops unless you like circle around or something, which like it's not very efficient to do. You can do it, it's not very good to do. But what people actually do is that they learn how to correct for the wrist circular motion with like the length of their hand. So they're adjusting their fingers so that it corrects for the course, and you still can kind of get a circular shape with just your wrist, because like it still does spin. It's not a good ball joint, but it's good enough. Now, you still have this problem with the ball of your shoulder, because like the ball of your shoulder is a circle. Your arm is not. It is a wedge point. So if you want to draw on a notepad, you still need to learn like how to use the ball of your shoulder and to move your arm correctly, or to lock your arm. And that's something that's not always described to people if like you just tell them, use the ball of your shoulder. And even if you say like, yeah, your arm, you have to like do muscle memory. Well, how do you do that muscle memory, and why do you do that? And like it becomes a very complex system of teaching the thing. Some people do notice that and will teach that. Like I had a teacher who taught me to use the ball of my shoulder and to lock my arm. Nowadays, I don't lock my arm because I know how to bend it in the specific way, which they didn't teach. But like that one step did help me a lot. Now, of course, these biases of like what a beginner or a pro is a collective thing that we kind of all build, which is why we can go like, oh, this guide is for medium people who know these things, thus we can just talk about this information without having to backtrack everything. But at the same time, like, what does it mean to know something for learning? Because, like, a lot of beginners will go like, oh, I don't know how to draw anything. But there's a catch to that, because I bet most of you can do this. Write the word cat, which, if you notice, the C is just almost a circle, right? Like, you could just transfer drawing a C into drawing a little circle. You can do that, but most people don't think about that because writing something and drawing something are two different things. Even though they are directly comparable, you know how to use a tool, thus you can use that tool for more than just writing cat. Bias is a pretty big thing because it will tell you how you teach other people, because it's how you learned, like what experiences did you have and what did other people tell you. And some of these things are very big. So like, I'm a 2D artist, so I will know more 2D things than, say, like trying to deal with glass work. Like, there are better people to ask. But like, I can still describe how like temperature works and why the glass melts and like the dyes that they're using, and like there's a certain level of like what's a beginner person, what's a medium person, what's a expert. Like, how do you know where to start? And the answer a lot of times is just, I don't know, it's just kind of based on the person. And a lot of, artists, when I was starting out, the answer for a lot of questions was, you gotta feel it. Feelings are good. Feeling it for art, not great for communication of teaching. But it is a real problem because, like, what does feeling mean? A lot of times it just means like the little things that like a teacher isn't gonna tell you. I'm glad that a teacher told me to lock my arm to draw a circle. But I don't lock my arm all the time to draw a circle, because you don't need to lock the arm, you just need to use the motion of the ball joint. And it also depends on the angle, because like if I try to do this, like I can't really use it that well. But if I turn this way, I can use it. So like there's different aspects that you have to think of, and not everyone's going to be thinking of those problems. Or it's something where like a person has to ask like a very specific question for you to say that answer. And for a YouTube question, you're not going to be able to ask that unless you do it in the comments, but like the video's already made. So what does one focus upon? Thus, these biases are a bigger deal than I think a lot of people like to realize, which, causes the issue of you gotta feel it, because if you just feel what's inside, you don't really have to think about like why you're doing something. Why rolling the ball of your shoulder isn't just rolling the ball of your shoulder, but it's a whole movement with your body, and how do you do that movement with your body? Like, there's a lot to consider when you're discussing all this stuff. In my opinion, the two major things about trying to learn anything is usually curiosity and analysis. And that isn't always inherently found in just saying how something works. People start off in the wrong place because the assumptions that we kind of make collectively aren't always helpful, and that's something that like is really important to me as an artist. I think those assumptions are something that should be discussed very early on, because if you know how to analyze something, then the problems are a lot easier to solve. And this can be done in like any subject, such as how to jump in a video game. No, seriously, this is relevant to biases in artwork. How do you jump in a video game? So if you think about it just for a bit, you'll know that jumping isn't that simple of a thing, because like you have gravity in and of itself is like a bunch of factors to get all the variables in place so that you're actually going to the correct location with the correct speed, and there's a lot of stuff to it. But in simple terms, you can just think of jumping as a little bit of elementary math. And that elementary math does make really cool outcomes like what you're seeing on screen. There's a lot that you can do when you think of people jumping. This isn't the fastest score, I only ran this once, but the main point is like, why jump? How jump? How do I do jump so I play a fun game like this? So the quick rundown is like, think of me as the core position, think of the ground as the ground position, and we're both set at 0. I am standing because the computer says 0 is the ground, like that is the final point. Let's say press a button that adds like 12 to my height by the computer going like, hey, well, I could instantly pop up somewhere. Like I could just pop up. That was a little higher than 12. Let's say that over the course of a few seconds, I will jump up, and then over the course, I'll jump down. And the math behind that is just something that can be like, hey, core position's at 0, I'm gonna change it to 12. How much time does it take to get there over 3 seconds? Well, every second, he's gonna go up 4 jump points. And so, at the height, he'll be at 12. But now gravity comes in and says like, hey, well, I've gotten to 12, so I'll check to see how far he goes down. Over the course of a few seconds, it's like, hey, we're gonna put him down 4 points. And you keep going down until the math problem goes like, hey, that's a negative number, and there's no ground below 0, so just put that number back to 0, and core stays on the ground. The fun part of making a jump is then learning like how to make it look nice, how to make it look jumpy. And that right there causes a huge issue. What does a nice jump look like? Like, seriously, what does a nice jump look like? And the answer is a whole range of things. Like, what do you want the mood of the jump to be? How do you actually want it to work? And like, that starts to get into a lot of complications, because like you can make a jump realistic and make it feel bad. Like, jumping doesn't always have to be fun. One of the fun things about video games is that it's cartoonish, even when it's like realistic. At points, like, you still have to think about like why things are jumping the way they are. In a computer, you have to program in what you want. The computer isn't going to figure out things for you, which means that you can just not have gravity. You don't actually need to jump. Again, a lot of things are visual. You know that there's gravity here because you can see the water floating down, and you can, see a little bit of the corner of the ground here. But I could be standing on the side of the place. There doesn't need to be a down, right? And like, that's what a lot of computers are. That's what a lot of games are. Which means that when you're building up a game, you can provide no jump. You can even do space. Because of course you can. You don't need gravity. You can float around all you want. There's nothing that says you need a floor. You can just float. You can just do that. The reason why we don't normally do that, the reason why we don't just float around in most games, is because most people are used to having a floor, used to falling, used to having some reaction that isn't just spinning in the void. So, and that's really useful to use. You can use that to communicate with others, but at the same time, a lot of people just kind of give it as like an inherent thing that needs to be there, and thus not being able to like think beyond that is a bias that can affect a lot of drawings, that can affect how you perceive problems, can make you think that something must be, rather than just kind of it being a thing that exists. And I think that's a really important thing in like my artwork, that I like want to be out there, because at the end of the day, this is, all fake. This is my squeaky chair, and I can stand up at any time. And you're just kind of, up there. There's still a ground here, because this is VR chat. There's going to be ground. But it doesn't have to be. There doesn't need to be a jump. There doesn't need to be a circle with the arm. You can do it with other things. There's a lot of ways to do things in life. My belief is that art is like a language, and that you have grammar and words and a whole communication of things that people will talk about to build up like the foundation of communication. And that is very important to me for teaching, which, again, is why I kind of get stuck on what to talk about, because there's just a lot to talk about. My bias is towards thinking about like, why am I talking about the things that I'm talking about, how to like talk about them. And at a certain point, like, I do just have to kind of decide like, hey, I'm going to talk about color theory, or I'm going to talk about the relationship between lines, or I'll talk about like how transformation is really good for learning like how to do anatomy, like just a bunch of things. And of course that's fine, but I do want a video like this to point back to, so that people can look and say like, hey, this is where Koor is coming from. This is what Koor is trying to teach in the way that they're trying to teach it. When I was a beginner and I was going around asking experts about what they were considering for learning about, an answer that I got more often than not was, you gotta feel it. And I mentioned that earlier about the circles, but it really is a big point where I don't like when people say that. Feelings are good. You should feel things, but you can also communicate your feelings. And when artists say like, hey, you just gotta feel it, what they're really saying is like, I'm not gonna teach you all the little things that got that artist to this point, right? Like that's just basically what the phrase is. And I really want to avoid that, but I also can't always avoid that because inherently I will have to drop information. There's a certain point at which a 50-hour video is not going to really help anyone, right? Like it's not going to help me, it's not going to help you, it's not going to help with anything. The starting point of your frame is important in and of itself. So I have a few ideas on what I want to start off teaching, but I do need this aspect to be one of the more important parts to remember. I want to teach you like the grammar rather than just the words, because the words at any point can be redefined, but the grammar, how things go about, is more of a process that can get you through a lot more and make everything like just a lot better. Sometimes people leave things unsaid. Sometimes people don't communicate what they're trying to say, and that's where biases come out to be. And I want to, like, I'm never going to be able to avoid that. There's no way to avoid that. I have biases, which is why I produce things the way that I do. But I want that to be an open thing so that it's much easier to learn. So, like, I have other videos that talk about things that I like or the way that I explain things and whatnot that you can learn from. But even then, not everyone's going to watch that. Not everyone needs to watch that. But at least if people watch this video, they understand that there is more to just a circle. I think as a beginner, it's much easier to learn when you're asking the whys rather than just the hows. Like, there's no correct way to do something, but you do want people to tell their ways of doing things, because although there's no real correct way, there is a correct way for you to do something that you feel you have accomplished your goal. And that in and of itself is correct until you change the goal again, in which case there's a new way to be correct. And that's really a main thing about teaching, that, you know, again, I overcomplicate things. It's just in my nature, but also I feel like that's not a bad nature. My language was formed from the experiences I've had as well as listening to others. And that allows me to communicate what I'm trying to teach in the way that I do. And, you know, one day you'll be able to do that as well, or can do that with your own language. And I think that's really important. Like I'm very, very particular in saying that that's important, because I feel like that in and of itself, if you can get that lesson of like learning just how to communicate, you can learn whatever you want, because at that point you can just listen to whatever anyone else is saying. And being able to analyze words rather than just memorize words is really the point of being able to have your own voice in art and be able to know how to draw circles or how to use color theory. Like, that is an important aspect, and maybe the most important aspect of art or video games or math or anything. It's very important to communicate. I'll try my best to explain art in a way that I understand it so that I can teach it to you. And hopefully most people get it, and the people that don't hopefully have you in the future to talk about it, or have others that can already explain it in the ways that they understand it. And, you know, I think that's what everyone kind of wants out of like any sort of teaching, but also I kind of need help in this endeavor. I don't want to make videos about just showing off how I can draw. That's like, it can help, but that's not really the best thing that in my eyes. I want to make videos to help teach and for others to actually learn from it. So commenting below of like what you want to see helps me greatly, because then I have more of a focus of like where to go. Because I do have more professional videos like how to draw furry heads that I am in the process of making as at the time of recording this video. But like I do want to make sure that people are learning so that I get more furry art, more video game art, all those cool things. That's important to me. And so yeah, just if you have a question, comment below and I will try to answer it. Yeah. To end off this video, I'll give a few more of my biases that I feel like is important to me just as a person. You can find that in other videos, but just for now, just a short list, because when I point people to this video, there are just going to be people who will not look at other videos. which is understandable. But at least here, you get a little bit of like knowing about me or what I view as important and stuff. So I'm a USA artist, primarily from Florida and Michigan. I've visited Canada and Mexico before, but I would like to travel elsewhere in the world. I'm a hybrid furry who's been lurking the fandom since around the age of 13. I used to be a tennis player and a figure skater. I actually won a few gold medals as a figure skater in my local tournaments. My current primary entertainment medium is like video games, YouTube, artwork, normally furry artwork, but like I like art in general. I used to go to university for computer science and game design. I am dyslexic. I was diagnosed when I was a little baby Koor, so that's a thing. Also osteochondroma, that's also a thing. I used to be forklift certified, so I would like pick up the pallets and drive them elsewhere. So that was a time. Oh, there are people who think I'm a Christian. Very much an atheist. That informs a lot of things. People just think that like I have like a good work ethic and I talk about morals and philosophy and just stuff like that, and like somehow doing that and not being mean makes you a Christian, but like very much an atheist. I'm also very political, but in the way of like talking about like Medicare for all or having food carts. I really want food carts. That is my politics currently. Lots of food carts. Just stuff like that, like pro LGBT, all those things. I like the taste of cold, and I really love ketchup. I'm not red because of ketchup, but also I'm maybe red because of ketchup. Not actually, but that's the secret lore now. There's a lot of other facts I could go into. I can keep going. It's not that hard, but I think that's a good list to stop there and do that. If you have any questions about like stuff about me or things that you'd like to learn, ask those below because I'll make those type of videos too. But primarily, if you have art questions, leave them below. I will try to answer them, and hopefully people learn from them, because that's the whole goal. If you've been sent this video by me, it's because I wanted you to watch everything before this, and primarily just learn that like my biases and why I'm doing stuff. And yeah, I think that's very important. It's a very important thing to know why people are teaching the way they are, or like where their biases come from. It's a thing. It's gonna be a thing. I will make another video that's more like professionally edited about that thing, but this is a casual version because casual videos are fun. Subscribe for all the answers that I'll give about like the furry fandom, my personal life, gaming, philosophy, random thoughts, art, all the things. If you ask something, but then you don't subscribe, you won't get the answer. So then you should subscribe. Thank you to my Patreons for helping support these videos monetarily. You can see their names scrolling across the screen right now. It helps me greatly produce these videos without having to worry about the hunger. And if you would like to help with that, you can go to patreon.com/peercore or help share these videos so more people learn about all the things. And also maybe go to my Patreon. Like they go to my Patreon. That's how Patreon works. Keep your biases pure, and I'll see you next time, everyone.